Hello again from Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We're broadcasting from Rigel Studios here in Las Vegas, Nevada. This show is about guns, related politics, and self-defense, mostly politics, this particular show. Fired Up is on my website, Fired Up with Bob Irwin, as well as the American Guns and Glory Network, YouTube, and numerous other media. If your local internet provider does not carry Fired Up, then ask him to do just that. The new show is posted every Thursday around 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Our audio feed is rebroadcast for radio listeners on Saturdays at noon on the Nevada Talk Network. If you go to KELY1230.com, you will find a list of the stations in your part of Nevada. If you have questions or comments, feel free to send me an email at bob@firedupmail.com. That's bob@firedupmail.com. Or leave a message on my office recorder. Or don't leave your phone on when you're on the air, Bob. How about that? You can tell this is being recorded right now. If you don't leave contact information when you call that number, I can't call you back, so please leave contact information. There are several hundred defensive uses of firearms each week in the United States, rarely truthfully or fully covered by mainstream media. I always select a few for each show for my listeners' education. Most are good shootings, some are questionable, sometimes they're just plain wrong, but all are educational for those of you that keep a defensive firearm in your home, or carry one for self-defense in your vehicle or on the street. Individual incidents are generally adjudicated under local law. The advice given here may not apply in the area where you live. Advice from a local gun-savvy defense attorney is always recommended. Stories are often paraphrased for clarity by translation from police jargon, lawyer speak, and regional accents into more standard American English. And as usual, incidents are as reported, but the names of the individuals involved are deleted. The identification of the cops and the lawyers and the media are generally used. We have a presidential election coming up. It is, unless you've been living under a rock, you know what is going on between the president-elect, as he calls himself, Joe Biden, and the rest of the world. The current mess with the election is amazing. Anyway, we have some comments on that for the first long segment of this show. There is apparently voter fraud in this election that must be uncovered. Trump's campaign attorneys are confident that there is evidence that shows the algorithm used by Dominion voting system switched votes from Trump to Biden. That could change the results, which will save gun owners from the Biden-Harris administration. If Biden-Harris are confirmed as winners when the Electoral College actually votes in December, I believe it's December 14, they plan executive orders to outlaw civilian copies of M16s, any firearm capable of holding more than 10 cartridges, any such magazines, etc., etc. This is planned as a forced buyback program administered by the newly appointed cabinet-level gun czar, Beto O'Rourke. Firearms owners have voiced a few reactions, and we're going to talk about now what to do if this takes place. One is to take your family and firearms to a free state. As this will be a federal order, that solution clearly will not work. It will apply to all states and territories of the United States. As to changing countries, which I've seen a few people say, it's already illegal to transport guns out of the country without State Department permission. A second possibility is to hide your firearms. This is the one where we start to get into the woods. Sales records that BATF has in the form of the 4473s are available and will eventually cause a nice letter from the government to bring in your affected firearms for disposal. If the letter is ignored, it will be followed with a home visit by a government employee to be sure you got their letter. You may say that you sold them years ago to someone at a gun show and don't recall who bought them. So now you've lied to the investigators, so your guns that are hidden now in your house or your backyard or wherever are now officially contraband, and you have committed a felony by lying about their location. This can only go downhill from there. The next move on the part of the government would be an actual law enforcement officer, probably from a local department, showing up with a request to search your property. They've got records that says there's guns and they don't believe you and they want to look around your property. You politely decline and the guy leaves. Now you can't use your firearms for home defense anyway. You've already said you don't have them, where the government says you got to tell them that you got them. So you're now a felon in possession of illegal weapons. A truly stupid move here would be to actually physically resist the official at your door. The vast majority of local, state, and even federal law enforcement believe in the right to keep and bear arms. While they are out doing their job of protecting you, who is protecting their families, they are not the bad guy here. Do not blame the guy who's sent to your door to pick up your guns or look for your guns or search your backyard with a metal detector. With the predictable rise in crime coming when nobody has the ability to defend their homes and families, the public will not put up with this new reality. Local politicians and governors will eventually be forced out of office by constant protest. Beto O'Rourke cannot arrest 100 million Americans. That ain't actually going to happen. All of this fantasy leads me to a solution. Given that millions and millions of Americans are hunters or engage in firearm sports like skeet shooting, those firearms will be left alone by the Biden-Harris and Congress. Our Republican, actually, Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo, commented to me once when we were speaking about the October 1, 2017 mass shooting, that one of his personal hunting rifles would deter a home invader. Well, he was correct. A pointed rifle is a serious deterrent, and a shot from one is so loud that neighbors a block away will all be calling 911. So this is the solution to this worst case scenario, is get a hunting rifle. Not in a military caliber, as Biden-Harris may outlaw possession of military ammunition. Pick up a .243 or a .270 and get some rifle instruction at an outdoor range. Find a friend to take you small game hunting. You might find it challenging and help reduce the overpopulation of rabbits along the way. Find a nice 20-gauge skeet gun and become a skeet shooter. You will certainly find that to be challenging. You will have the ability to defend your home for whatever time it takes for the courts, protests, or another election to replace the anti-gun leftists and restore American freedom. But you will have the ability to defend yourself because they will never dare outlaw bolt-action rifles or 20-gauge shotguns people use to shoot skeet with. That I am entirely confident in. We're going to pause for a little self-generated commercial here about my latest book and how to get it on Amazon, and I'll be back in just a few minutes. I'll be here. Don't go away. My latest book, Self-Defense with Firearms, Use of Force in Nevada, is now available on Amazon Kindle for $4.95. You can download it now. It contains examples of dozens of shootings and pointing a firearm cases that I've personally experienced in my 24 years in law enforcement, or where I testified in court or deposition as a firearm and use of force expert. The book is about the use of firearms in defense of yourself and others in my home state of Nevada. I have appeared as an expert witness in Nevada courts dozens of times, and that experience has shown me the necessity of putting pen to paper once again. Nevada state law as printed can be misleading to those of you who read it, as it is written in legal jargon, what I usually call lawyer speak. These statutes are also bent or even broken by the courts in their everyday decisions that we generally call case law. Those are rulings that say this or that statute does not apply in a particular incident and similar cases. That causes the law you are depending on when you make a decision to use your firearm only partially or not apply at all to your actions. Relevant Nevada statute numbers are included here and there, so readers may look up current wording on the Nevada State website. Teaching firearms in 28 law enforcement academies, including cadets from 26 different Nevada agencies, personally instructing over 30,000 concealed firearm permit students and 20,000 private security officers, I've discovered a lot of commonalities in deadly force incidents. Less than 100 pages, this book offers advice that can save lives and costs of expensive defense lawyers to reduce your losses in the inevitable civil lawsuits that follow these incidents. Get a copy, learn how to avoid, prepare for, and react to life-threatening situations. And we are back. This second story comes from the Washoe Daily Herald. A journalist named Karen Madden reported November 16, 2020 in Stettin, Wisconsin. That's Stettin. Hope I'm saying that right. The Marathon County Sheriff's Office is looking for a man suspected of breaking into an indoor shooting range and retail firearm store on Sunday evening. Just before 11 in the evening on Sunday, a caller reported a burglary in progress at Zingers and Flingers, that's the name of the store, which is located at 229179 Marathon Country O. That's the name of the road, Marathon Country O. Two male suspects broke into the business by smashing out windows. The business owner was in his back office and heard the noise. The owner got a rifle and went to the entry of the business where two male suspects were and confronted them. The owner fired several rounds from his rifle and both suspects ran. Deputies found one a short distance away and arrested him. A female subject was found nearby driving a vehicle suspected to be meant for a getaway, according to the Marathon County Sheriff's Office press release. The deputies, of course, also arrested her. The deputies were still looking for the one missing suspect as of Monday afternoon. He's described as 5 feet 9 inches tall, weighing 200 pounds, was wearing a black hoodie, blue jeans, and a black mask with neon green on it. Officers say people should consider him dangerous and possibly armed. Officials ask anyone with information about the suspect's location to please call 715-261-1200, option 1. People can also tip anonymously at marathoncountycrimestoppers.org. Comments on this, it's pretty clearly a good self-defense shooting. In this day and age where gun shops are frequently targets of burglaries or takeover robberies, All firearm dealers have beefed up surveillance and alarm systems. We have had a number of such crimes here in Las Vegas, Nevada. BATF is actually doing preventative gun shop visits all around the country to insist on alarms and overnight lockup of most firearms. They want everything locked in a safe. That only makes sense. So when you come in the morning, the store may be messed up from broken windows, but your guns will still be there. How dumb can you be to do a break-in at an isolated and occupied indoor shooting range? These guys have to be morons. Anyway, we're going to break here for a word from some of our friends and associates. I will be back in just a moment. Attorney Donald J. Green, a common guest of mine on Fired Up. He can be reached at 702-409-8239. He specializes in gun case litigation. He is your man. Don Green, 702-409-8239. And Battlefield Vegas, my new kind of home for this show. They're on Circus Drive, directly behind the Circus Hotel and Casino. You can find them there with CCW classes and an amazing place for gun rentals, everything you could possibly imagine. Check out, if you're in town as a tourist, check out battlefieldvegas.com. And I'm back. We're going to give you some numbers now to kind of back up the data that I just gave you on having a hunting rifle and things like that. Pew Research reported in March and April of 2017, 30% of American adults say they personally own a gun, and an additional 11% say they live with someone who does. This is according to the Pew Research Survey Center. Whether or not they personally own a gun, Americans have broad exposure to firearms. 48% of U.S. adults grew up in a household with guns. 59% have friends who own guns, and 72% have fired a gun at some point in their lives, including 52% of those who have never personally owned a gun. Among the 41% of Americans who own a gun, 66% say they own more than one, including 20% who own 5 or more. 72% own a handgun or pistol. Of those, 72% of those own a pistol or a handgun, while 62% own a rifle and 54% own a shotgun. 73% say they could never see themselves not owning a gun. Protection tops the list of reasons why gun owners have a gun, according to the same survey. 67% say this is a major reason why they own a firearm. A considerably smaller percentages say hunting. That's 30% of people say that's why they have the gun. Sport shooting is another 30%. Gun collecting is around 13%, and their job, carrying one because they have to have one for their employment, is 8%. White men and women are about equally likely to cite protection is the reason they want the gun. 65% and 71% respectively as a major reason why they own a gun. Women are more likely than men to cite protection as the only reason. 20% of women versus 8% of men say the only reason they have a gun is for personal protection. Regardless of whether they live in an urban, suburban, or rural areas, Americans are much more likely to cite protection than any other considerations as a major reason for owning a gun. Rural gun owners, however, are far more likely than their urban and suburban counterparts to say hunting is a major reason why they own a firearm. 48% of rural gun owners say that they hunt, compared to 34% of suburbanites and 20% of urbanites, city dwellers. That's pretty expected here. A few comments. These numbers that I just gave you are almost 3 years old, generated by people who decide to tell a telephonic or worse, a written survey that they have a firearm in their home. Trust me on this, almost everybody lies on surveys, especially firearm surveys. I expect I'm not the only one. Do you personally know anyone who would answer these survey questions truthfully? As an example, a few years ago, a local teacher asked her class of 33 fifth graders to write on a small piece of paper, yes or no, to her verbal question, does your home have a gun in it? I don't know her motivations here, but she was trying to make a point about something, I guess. Anyway, 32 of the children wrote yes. My friend's son was the only one who wrote no. He was wrong. His parents had a hidden handgun. The real answer was all 33 homes had a firearm. 100% had a firearm, and that number is probably higher now, you think? Of course, that in itself was a bad idea, as the gun was hidden but not locked up. When your parents left the house, did you search through everything they had in their room? Of course you did. For child safety, guns need to be locked away, not hidden. But the point of this was, this is a 3-year-old survey in Las Vegas City, average neighborhood, and every person in that neighborhood, that school, these kids all went to the same school, had a gun in their home. We're going to break again one last time for a word from some of our friends and associates. I'll be right back. Freestyle Martial Arts, located at Jones and Russell here in Las Vegas. You can reach them at 702-551-9009. That's 702-551-9009. CCS Gunsmithing. Chris Eifelt, the man who does all the NRA help, he's at 2216 South Rainbow Boulevard near Sahara. He can be reached at 702-365-1732. Once again, 702-365-1732. Jerry Creed, a trust attorney. If you have a firearms trust or need one, this is your guy. You can reach Jerry at 702-806-7777. That is 702-806-7777. CCW Maggie is found all over the internet. You can reach her by phone at 702-375-5900. That's 702-375-5900. All sorts of firearms training, ladies only classes. She is the best of the best. Call CCW Maggie. This last story kind of follows on to what I've been saying in the previous couple about the number of firearms that are out there. The National Shooting Sports Foundation, it's a trade association for the firearms industry, updated retail survey-based estimates and concluded that nearly 5 million Americans purchased a firearm for the very first time in 2020. NSSF surveyed firearms retailers, which reported that 40% of sales were conducted to purchasers who have never previously owned a firearm. They can tell that when they go to do the background check. NSSF NSF tracks the background checks associated with the sale of a firearm based on FBI's National Instant Background Check System. The NICS checks for January through July 2020 was a record 12.1 million guns, which is up 71.7% from the 7.1 million NICS checks run during the same period, the same 7 months in 2019. This equals nearly 5 million first-time gun owners in the first 7 months of 2020. This is a tectonic shift in the firearms and ammunition industry marketplace and a complete transformation of the gun-owning community, said Lawrence G. Keene. He's Senior Vice President and General Counsel for the association. These first-time buyers represent a group of people who until now were agnostic regarding firearms capability. Speaks like a lawyer. They didn't care one way or the other about owning firearms. That is rapidly changing, and these Americans are taking hold of their God-given right to keep and bear arms and protect themselves and their loved ones. NSF surveys revealed that 58% of firearms purchasers were among African American men and women, the largest increase of any demographic group. Women comprise 40% of first-time gun purchasers. Retailers noted they are seeing a 95% increase in firearm sales and a 139% increase in ammunition sales over the same period in 2019. You know that if you tried to buy a gun or ammunition somewhere lately. Several factors are contributing to the sustained surge in firearm purchases. Spiked sales in March with a record-setting 2.3 million NICS background checks conducted for firearm sales. The same month the coronavirus pandemic struck. During this time, police warned response times would be tested while mayors and governors emptied prisons, including of violent felons. Some of those were rearrested within days of committing another violent crime. After Memorial Day, protests turned to looting, riots, and destruction, which continues today in several major metropolitan areas. Politically charged calls to defend the police are also a spur to sales. This is an election year, and firearm sales typically do rise during presidential election years. However, this year, Democrat candidates Joe Biden and U.S. Senator Kamala Harris are calling for stringent gun control measures, including forcible confiscation, banning entire classes of lawful firearms from possession, licensing schemes, and repealing the Protection of Lawful Firearms in Commerce Act. I've spoken on that act on several shows. That's the one that prevents gun sellers or transferers from being sued when the paperwork was right, but it turns out the guy was lying on the paperwork and shouldn't have received the gun. They're trying to hold dealers to strict liability. If they enter the gun in commerce, no matter how many times it changes hands after that, they can be sued for any wrongful act done with that firearm. That will obviously close the gun industry immediately. You can't get insurance for that. You can't stay open. You sell all your inventory, declare bankruptcy, and walk away before the lawsuits are filed. Each month since March, NICS background checks have set a record as to the strongest number ever recorded in that month. And for clarity here, I want to explain, the National Shooting Sports Foundation generally represents the interests of firearms manufacturers and distributors. The National Rifle Association, you're more familiar with, represents interests of shooters, collectors, and retail firearms dealers. There is, of course, a bit of crossover between the two organizations, and they obviously often work together on major issues. That's it for today. I hope it was educational, and you can replay this tape to pick up that data when you need to do that. You can check out my recent shows at firedupwithboberwin.com. It contains several dozen recent episodes. I'll be back next Thursday on my website, firedupwithboberwin.com, the American Guns and Glory Network, numerous other websites, television and radio stations. While watching any media, just click on subscribe and new shows will be sent to your phone or computer automatically. Please patronize our friends and supporters. Most of them are having a really bad time in this election. The lawyers are doing okay. Everybody needs lawyers. The retailers are in a tough go. My logo merchandise, hats, shirts, and books are available at Battlefield Vegas, just behind Circus Circus on the Las Vegas Strip. If you're ever in Las Vegas, Battlefield Vegas is a must-see attraction. You can shoot a minigun or any of several hundred firearms and even crush a car with an Abrams tank at their associated outdoor facility. Transportation is provided. You can contact them at info@battlefieldvegas.com. Thank you so much for watching. Next week's show will probably be on about the same subject because we'll be pushing whether we're going to keep our guns or not through this election season. Have a good week and stay safe.